For thousands of years, we have been telling stories about the moment a human being is offered something irresistible and makes a choice that they cannot take back. Faust makes a deal with the devil. Pandora opens the box. Orpheus looks back at Eurydice. Icarus flies too close to the sun. Underneath these choices is a question. What happens when we give in to temptation and it costs us the thing we want the most? Sometimes what feels like love is fear. Sometimes what feels like self-respect is ego. Sometimes what feels like an opportunity is a bargain. A Faustian bargain is what happens when we trade in something priceless for a fleeting desire. Ego, lust, greed, the desire to feel powerful, the desire to feel admired, the desire to feel chosen. The problem is that when we make a bargain, we don't always know what it will cost us. And once the deal has been made, you cannot take it back. The reason we've never stopped telling these stories is because we've never stopped making these choices. Faustian bargains rarely look like Faustian bargains while they are occurring. Oftentimes, they sound perfectly reasonable. We're just friends. This is an opportunity that could change the course of your career. They'll get over it. It's only just this one time. That's just how business works. I'll make it right with them later. Nobody is going to ask you whether or not you would like to trade in your integrity or the integrity of a loved one for the success of your career. Nobody asks you if you'd like to trade in your partner's trust for the feeling of being desired. Nobody asks you if you'd like to trade in your family for money. The bargain is always disguised as something you want. It often even hinges on a personal weakness. In fact, these bargains often speak directly to a part of you that is hungry. Hungry for ambition, hungry for power, hungry for status, the feeling of winning, which is why they can often be so challenging to turn down. Suddenly, our values can start to feel negotiable or up for sale. And sometimes we'll negotiate with ourselves and we'll say that this one doesn't count, that this one time is okay. And I think that this is especially important for you if you are an ambitious person, because ambition requires some degree of sacrifice. And if you are trying to build something meaningful, you are going to have to decide what sacrifices you are willing to make. So you might be asking yourself, how do you know if you are making a worthy sacrifice or a terrible bargain? I think there are 3 questions you can ask yourself. Question number 1 is, what do you actually want? Because a Faustian bargain works by confusing what you want now with what you want the most. And in order to know the difference, you have to know yourself. Because how can you know what to hold on to if you don't know what you value? How can you recognize a terrible deal when you don't know what you want to protect? You might say that you value things like family, like loyalty, like integrity. But what happens when someone comes up to you and they offer you something in exchange for one of them? Would you trade your customers' personal data for money? Would you trade your child's trust for the approval of someone else? Would you trade your dignity to feel significant? If you're a politician, would you trade best interests of your constituents for the donor who helped put you in office? Would you trade the trust of someone you love for the intoxicating feeling of being desired by someone new? What are you willing to trade for money? What are you willing to trade for status? Would you trade your soul for anything? And if so, what is it? Are there any trades that you've already made? You see, you have a hierarchy of values, whether you've unconsciously articulated it or not. And so it's important to bring that to the surface so that you know your weaknesses and what you are willing to actually trade for and what you are not. You may value success, but you may also value your family. You may value money, but you may also value freedom. You value approval and significance, but you also value integrity. Faustian bargain forces the question of which is worth more to you, and which will you want once the high of getting what you want wears off. Question number 2. Ask yourself, what is this actually costing you? You can make the hard choice when you know what it actually costs you. You can make as many hard choices as you want. And we often need to make the really hard choices. Sometimes it's hard to discern between love and fear. Sometimes it's hard to discern between strength and ego. People who are otherwise good will make Faustian bargains because they do not understand or appreciate the cost of what it is that they were actually giving up. They're not actually thinking it through. In which case, the outcome can be catastrophic. And this is where we often have to make really difficult, unnatural decisions. You might have to make the decision, for example, to stop talking to someone who you really love, because whatever that is costing you is actually of much greater value to you long term. So this can feel unnatural. It can feel like the antithesis of love and of care, especially if it's someone that you've known your entire life. And so sometimes the stakes can be incredibly high. But those stakes are also high given a sacrifice in a lot of cases. You may decide that it's not worth sacrificing your own integrity, your own well-being for that of another person's. Every choice you make has a price. One reason for a terrible bargain could be that we are overly focused on the cost of losing or leaving as opposed to the cost of staying, because two things that you value are at odds. Giving up an opportunity or a person can hurt. Turning down the money hurts. Telling the truth might cost you something. The choice might hurt, but it doesn't mean that it's the wrong choice. Sometimes the right choice can feel terrible because you know that the price that you are paying is less of the price of the pain that the other person is going to pay. These bargains can also be really challenging to navigate emotionally, especially if something like grief can make us feel as though we've made the wrong decision. So emotions, you can't base what the right decision was based off of emotion alone. The important thing to remember here is that every option has a price, and the mistake lies in not knowing what that price is. So it is important to compare the full cost of both choices. The pain of saying yes, the pain of saying no, the pleasure of saying yes, the pain of saying no, understanding the costs. And that brings us to the third question, which I think may be the most important. And that is, who do you want to be? Who are you becoming? Because a Faustian bargain is a test of who you actually want to become. Do you want to be the person who's accepted the bargain, traded in your soul for fame, compromised on your family for status and greed? Every bargain you are offered is a test. Because it is so easy to say that you value family, that you value relationships, that you value freedom, that you value loyalty when it's not costing you anything. Eventually, something that you value very much will come in conflict with something else that you really want. And your values, what you want the most, that is the most expensive. That is priceless. That is worth more than the money or whatever it is that you are bargaining for. That is the thing that you will be thinking of on your deathbed. And this is when your values go from theoretical to actually being real. Because up until this point, perhaps your values haven't been tested, or to this degree. It is so easy to say that you value integrity when you didn't have an extraordinary offer on the other side to compromise it. It is so easy to say that you are loyal when you've never had a temptation to betray someone. Hasn't been tested. Our choices are how we practice becoming who we want to be. The hope is that when it comes time for a bargain to be placed right in front of you, that you will choose the option that forges you into the person you actually want to be, because you were consciously aware while that offer was being presented to you. So be sure to ask yourself, who am I becoming if I accept this kind of deal? What am I teaching myself is negotiable? What am I teaching my kids is negotiable? What are you going to actually stand for? Will you stand for the things that you say you stand for when it's actually costing you something potentially enormous or life-altering? Which leads me to one final question, and that is, what isn't for sale? Ask yourself, what are you unwilling to give up no matter what? Unwilling to compromise on no matter what? What is too valuable to bargain with? What to you is priceless? What are you willing to die for? What is there no amount of money, no amount of status, fame, anything that you would trade for? What is so valuable to you that you would die for it? You don't want to be in a position where you make a bargain and the cost of what you're giving up isn't something you should have been willing to sell. And so your Faustian bargain probably won't look something like Faust's. It will be something that perfectly fits your biggest insecurities, your fears, the thing that, at least on the surface, you've wanted most. An opportunity to feel all powerful, to have everything you've ever wanted. It may sound perfectly reasonable. We're just friends. I can stop anytime I want. It's only this once. They'll get over it. I'll make it right with them later. So when that moment does come, ask yourself the 3 questions. 1, what do you actually want beneath what you want? 2, what is this actually costing you? And 3, who are you becoming if you're willing to make this deal? Understand what you are not willing to give up, what is not for sale before the offer arrives. Because if you don't, you may end up paying a price. You may not realize the cost until it's too late. For thousands of years, we've been telling these stories of people who realized too late what their choices had costed them. Maybe the reason we keep telling them is so that we don't have to learn the same lesson ourselves. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.